Thank you for joining us today. My name is Molly Whitehorn, Associate Regional Campaign Director for the Human Rights Campaign. We are here today because we are demanding that Governor Stitt vetoes Senate Bill 2, which will prevent transgender youth from participating in sports consistent with their gender identity. We are also demanding the House of Representatives cease movement on SB 9 and 1100, which will target the 2S LGBTQ+ community by expanding the definition of obscene materials to target people like us and eliminate inclusive gender markers from official state documents. In 2021, Oklahoma's Senate President pro tempore called SB 2 a solution in search of a problem. The advocates joining us here today have had to sit through hearings and listen as our elected officials attack them, our families, and our communities. Those legislators have shown no shame as they try to dehumanize and erase transgender identities. I want to be clear, by signing SB 2, Governor Stitt and the legislators in the State House are culpable for the harm they cause to 2S LGBTQ+ people's well-being caused by being subjected to continual legislative attacks on their dignity and humanity. There are real consequences to the discrimination perpetuated upon LGBTQ+ people, and particularly transgender youth. Already, more than 2,500 parents from all 50 states and Washington, D.C. issued an open letter organized by the Human Rights Campaign condemning the avalanche of anti-transgender legislation moving in legislators across the country. Businesses like Google, Apple, Amazon are among the hundreds of businesses that have signed a letter opposing legislation like this. Governor Stitt must do the right thing and put an end to these harmful bills that are hurting trans youth and their families. Oklahoma is better than that. Those gathered here today will share more about the personal impact these bills are having on their lives and the lives and well-being of trans youth. We will leave time at the end for press to ask questions. I'm now going to turn it over to Nicole to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Molly. My name is Nicole McAfee. I'm the Executive Director of Freedom Oklahoma, an organization that works to build the Oklahoma where all 2S LGBTQ+ Oklahomans are safe. My pronouns are they and she. I don't know about you, but personally I was never very good at sports. But when you graduate from a public high school with a class of 14 people, there's not a lot of opting out. So I played volleyball and basketball and tennis. My junior and senior year, I was even a cheerleader. I got to play on teams with my friends and even my little sister, Hannah. Lack of coordination and lack of natural talent aside, I built a lot of skills and great memories. For me, as is the case for so many kids, sports were about community and belonging, about the hours on a bus or at a tournament, about making friends and getting a healthy taste of competition. They were about learning to trust other people as part of a team, working hard to build fundamentals or to hone a particular skill, and ultimately learning to win and lose together. But last week, the Oklahoma Senate decided that trans girls, two-spirit, non-binary, and gender non-conforming kids shouldn't get that same opportunity. That they would effectively be barred from participating in sports all throughout school, from kindergarten through college, at the expense of their mental and emotional well-being. Governor Stitt, I am here today to plead with you to show a level of political courage that is necessary in this moment. Oklahoma kids are not a political bargaining chip. When you say you're going to build a top 10 state, that has to include a future for all kids in Oklahoma. To do that, you have to set a boundary, now. By acknowledging the fact that SB 2 targets harm at an already vulnerable group of kids. That means you cannot allow this legislation to go into effect, especially not with an emergency. Because the only emergency here is that transgender, two-spirit, and gender nonconforming kids in Oklahoma are trying their hardest to survive in conditions that are so unwelcoming, they're not sure they can live through another day of it. Let them know that all kids belong here, that they belong here. Let kids play. I believe whatever differences we have, we can agree on the fact that our work has the shared value of ensuring that kids are safe and supported enough that they can grow to be adults and thrive here. If that's true for you, Governor Stitt, You must veto SB 2. And to the members of the Oklahoma House of Representatives able to consider or dismiss Senate Bill 1100, disrupting the ability of non-binary, two-spirit, and gender nonconforming people from getting identification that accurately reflects who we are, and SB 9, a thinly veiled effort to criminalize providing to us LGBTQ plus representation of sex, sexuality, and gender to minors, please don't advance these bills. Spend your time on the work that Oklahomans so desperately need you to do, not these partisan attacks at the expense of Oklahomans, especially Oklahoma kids. Thank you. I'll now pass the mic to Sarah Cunningham of Free Mom Hugs.
Can you hear me? My name is Sarah Cunningham. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the founder of Free Mom Hugs. I'm a mother, I'm a woman of faith, I have a gay kid, and I live in Oklahoma, born and raised. When my child first came out to me, I behaved badly. I was frozen in my fear and ignorance of not understanding what it meant to be gay. When my son came out of his closet, I went into mine. And I got educated on things like the history of human sexuality, science, and evidence. And I heard stories from the beautiful LGBTQ plus community that changed my mind and my heart and my understanding and my belief. Today, I believe that the gay community is a gift from God. I believe that our transgender children add a beautiful dynamic to our families and to the community around us. In 2015, I wore a Free Mom Hugs button, and I went to the Oklahoma City Pride Festival, and with anyone who made eye contact with me, I would say, "Could I offer you a free mom hug?" The first hug I gave was to a beautiful young woman who said it had been 4 years since she got a hug from her mother because she's a lesbian. I said, "Well, I'm a mom, here's a hug, and I'm not letting go until you do." In 2016, I went to a support group that I thought was for high schoolers and families like mine. Turned out to be for the adult transgender community. I stayed because I brought cookies, and I knew the facilitator. That was my first interaction, sharing the same space with the transgender community that I know of. After that meeting, I sat in my Jeep and I cried hot tears in my car, because I thought, these are beautiful, misunderstood people. And I vowed that I would do whatever I could to advocate and to educate and to celebrate this community. The most I hear from the community abroad in Oklahoma is that they have been alienated from their families, from their church homes, from many parts of society, is that they lose their sense of belonging. And I cannot help but think what a difference in the life of that adult transgender group that I met on that day. What a difference their lives would have been if they would have been included in team sports, just to live authentically throughout their childhood. Because we know more now than we ever did on what it means to allow our children, number one, to show us who they are, and number two, to allow them the time and the space to live authentically and to be celebrated as a beautiful gift to this world and a dynamic that they bring. I'm asking our governor to get educated on the issues like human sexuality and the history of it, science and evidence, and to actually spend some time with our transgender community here in Oklahoma. And then let's have this conversation. Until then, the bills that we're discussing today are birthed completely out of fear and ignorance. And I know the power of fear and ignorance. I know the power of love and education. So let's have that conversation. Thank you.
Oh, I forgot to. Sorry, Nikki.
Hello, my name is Kendra WilsonClements, and I'm a proud Two-Spirit citizen of the Choctaw Nation. I am an activist and an advocate. I'm a co-creator in a nonprofit organization, a founder, CEO, in a successful high-growth organization. I'm a taxpayer, a teacher. I'm a board president, a school board president. I'm a parent I'm a mentor, a guardian. I'm a safe person who strives to create safe spaces and places for our 2S LGBTQ plus kids every single day. I wake up every single day in a system that is harmful, unhealthy, unwell, unsafe, and quite frankly, it is played out. I wake up every single day worrying sick about our youth, worrying about what oppressive policies will be written and or created in the house that we stand in today. I wake up every single day thinking up ways to better help, protect, and serve our 2S LGBTQ plus youth as our lawmakers and our governor consistently let them down. SB 2 is a dangerous, harmful, slippery slope. It's more than just about sports. This is a slippery slope. Bills like this have a horrifying implication and a ripple effect on our young ones. They're heartbreaking. I must say that a trans youth was supposed to join me today, one that I am a mentor to. And at the 11th hour, in a conversation with their guardian, their grandmother, they decided that it was too unsafe to be here. They didn't feel safe to step into these doors, to use their voice, to take an opportunity to express how they feel out of fear. In this house that we pay for as taxpayers, that we employ, the people who make these harmful policies and these laws, these young ones do not feel safe in this house. That is a problem. I'm here today demanding that we do better. I'm demanding that Governor Stitt vetoes Senate Bill 2, which will prevent transgender youth from participating in sports that are consistent with their gender identity. I am also demanding that the House of Representatives cease movement on SB 9 and 1100, which will further target our 2S LGBTQ plus youth. We have to stop this. We have to do better. We are losing young ones every single solitary day because of policies like this. It has to stop. Thank you. I want to introduce my sister, Sarah AdamsCornell.
Halito, Saho Chifoat, Sarah Adams-Cornell, Choctaw Hoyosia, So Ishkiat Tammy Adams, Sapognia, Dorothy Jefferson, Kot Amo Chokma Atikosh Himagnitak, Hashi Pinsa Lisa Nayukpa. My name's Sarah Adams-Cornell. I'm a proud Choctaw woman. I'm the daughter of Tammy Adams and the granddaughter of Dorothy Jefferson. And I'm so glad to be here among those who are here to support our youth today. But so sad that we have to do this again and again and again. I'm the president of the board of directors for the ACLU of Oklahoma and co-founder of Matriarch, but I'm not here speaking in those capacities today. I'm speaking to you as a mom and an auntie of two-spirit, transgender, gender nonconforming, non-binary kids. And I'm mad. I ask you, Governor Stitt, to remember what it was like to be 13, to remember what it was like, the joys of discovering who you are, of deciding what you're going to believe in, what you're going to become. The joys of team sports where you get to be with your peers, that experience you get to be coached by people you admire, to celebrate wins and losses together in community, and how that forms you as a person and sticks with you forever. I ask you to also consider what it was like to struggle as someone who was 13, 14, 15 years old, to have to determine what you're brave enough to say about yourself in a community that may or may not be accepting of you. Now imagine that your government is passing a law that intensifies the fears you already have about how the outside world looks at you. And let me tell you, our kids struggle so much as it is, and they are so hard on themselves that they don't need any more struggles in their lives to just simply be and exist. My sister Kendra and I started an organization just recently for our Indigenous Two-Spirit LGBTQ kiddos, not because we needed something else to do, but because we were so overcome with calls from our kids that need space, that need mentors, that need safety, that need encouragement to just be who they are. And I was up till 2:30 last night with my own kiddo, who was supposed to be here with us today, whose anxiety was through the roof because they could not be in a space like this for fear of what would happen. I can't tell you how hard that is to try to instill hope in someone who feels hopeless. But it's more difficult to be that person who is not feeling supported by a community. Don't take away the tools that they need, like sports, that help them decompress, that give them community and help them stay healthy. Our country loves to talk about freedom, but has a solid track record of moralizing who is worthy of that freedom based on skin color, religion, and now gender identity. And it's a new all-time low when we target kids. Who are we if we don't support and protect our kids? Legislators, the least you can do is protect them. It is a life or death situation because this kind of legislation, as my sister Kendra said, spirals. Today it's sports. What's next? Stop making it harder for our kids to survive in Oklahoma. Even if this passes, we're going to keep fighting. You will not silence our community. You will not win because our love is bigger than your fear. Yakoki. I'd like to introduce Cindy Nguyen with the ACLU of Oklahoma.
Hi, everybody. Can everybody hear me? My name is Cindy Nguyen. I am the Policy Director for the ACLU of Oklahoma. Dear Governor Stitt, our request is simple. Let kids play. This fight is not about sports. It is about erasing and excluding trans people and children in every aspect of public life. By singling out trans women and girls and enacting a sweeping ban on participation in athletics, SB 2 violates both the United States Constitution and Title IX of the Civil Rights Act. While there are real issues and gender inequities in Oklahoma sports when it comes to funding, resources, pay inequity, and much, much more, instead of addressing these issues, SB 2 promotes basic fears about trans athletes to the detriment of trans girls and their peers. While proponents of SB 2 have repeatedly asserted that this bill is necessary to protect women's sports in Oklahoma, there has not been a single example presented of an actual threat to women's sports in Oklahoma posed by including trans athletes. Trans people of all ages have been participating in sports consistent with their gender identity for ages and years, including at the Olympics since 2004 and in the NCAA since at least 2011. Current practices under the OSSAA already protect the fairness of competition in school sports. SB 2 is simply trying to solve a problem that does not exist in the state. Not only does SB 2 needlessly harm the mental health, the physical well-being, and the ability to access educational opportunities for trans women and girls, SB 2 plainly violates federal constitutional and statutory law. Please do not let lawmakers take away the opportunity for trans children to be kids. In every state and in every single community, trans people belong. Governor Stitt, please let kids play. Veto SB 2. I am now going to turn it over to Reverend Walke.
I am Reverend Dr. Laurie Walke. I have written and spoken in support for transgender student athletes as a former Division I student athlete myself in other times, but today I speak as an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ and as your friendly neighborhood pastorina, representing a wide and deep faith community that believes God loves the rainbow. We urge Governor Stitt to veto bills that target our transgender siblings and the wider queer community as a matter of faith. As a Christian in the middle of observing Lent and as a pastor preparing for Maundy Thursday, I bring with me what is arguably Jesus' most significant teaching, found in John 13, widely known as the New Commandment. Love one another, he says, for by this they will know you are my disciples. Not by discrimination, not by division, not by dogma, but by love. So I plead with you, Governor Stitt, as your sister in Christ. SB 2 and legislation like it is not loving. You have been given the statistics, you have been given the numbers, you have been given the stories, all of which consistently show how harmful and cruel this legislation is for our transgender youth. This is all Christians need to know. If we take Jesus seriously, to support anti-transgender legislation is to be anti-gospel, for the Bible tells us so. Love one another. Governor Stitt, what an opportunity you have here. We are watching. It is now my honor to turn the mic over to Representative Murray Turner.
It's really hard to follow all that up. Yeah, my name is Maury Turner. I am the representative for Oklahoma's 88th House District. My pronouns are they and them. And I think the number one thing I wake up and I think lately are the words of a very wise constituent, is that you will not get rid of 2S LGBTQ plus youth or communities. You will only create an environment that is unsafe and one in which they do not wish to live. And that's for a few different reasons, right? We make it incredibly hard here for folks to survive, let alone thrive. Oh, maybe a little bit of a trigger warning. I grew up in small town Oklahoma. And I had a very loving and affirming home family. I came out to my mom in the 2nd grade. If I was missing school in elementary school, it was because I was at an LGBTQ plus support group or a community listening session or learning conference about HIV and AIDS awareness and how to support folks living with it, right? But I also didn't envision a life to beyond high school. which resulted in a lot of self-harm. And that was with the supportive home. That was without seeing legislation continuously telling me, written by adults, leaders, right, in our community, continuously telling me that I didn't have a place here, right? And I used to think when I was a kid, what difference does it make if I have a supportive home? If the groups around me are continuously telling me, right, if what I'm hearing at school is that it's unnatural, that I am not welcome as I am, right, at school or at church. And now, a supportive home is the best place I can fall at the end of a day here. I get to rest my head in House District 88 with some of the strongest fighters that I could ever imagine that I get to do this work with. And I hear from students in the district and their families about what legislation like this does. And I could only think where I would be if legislation like this was happening as I was in high school, middle school, elementary school. In 2019, GLSEN did a state-by-state snapshot of school climate for LGBTQ plus students. And the vast majority of students in Oklahoma's education system regularly heard anti-LGBTQ remarks and rhetoric. 32% of students heard negative remarks about someone's gender expression. And of those 32, right, a lot of that anti-rhetoric came from faculty and staff. While the authors of these bills probably haven't talked to a transgender student or written legislation for issues that are, but have written legislation for issues that are non-existent, 14% of students in Oklahoma's public education system will have been continuously discouraged from engaging in sports because of education and rhetoric like this. Those percentages are students. That number grows higher and higher every day. We continue to give space to something like this. I have sat on the House floor as we are continuously trying to create an economic floor where businesses want to come here, right? We have continuously given tax breaks and credits for folks wanting to come, for entities, right, corporations wanting to come into Oklahoma. Like it was mentioned earlier, right? More than 180 major U.S. corporations have stood up and spoken out against anti-transgender legislation, right, being proposed in companies across the U.S. Like American Airlines, Apple, Google, IBM, Lyft, Marriott, Microsoft, Nike, PayPal have objected to anti-LGBTQ legislation. And 4 of the largest food companies have also condemned dangerous and discriminatory legislation that serves as an attack on our LGBTQ plus individuals, and particularly transgender and non-binary people. When we talk about the education of our students, only 9% of Oklahoma's students have received positive representation in education around LGBTQ plus people. And only 3% receive inclusive sex education in schools. These bills will prevent our youth from participating in sports, from being encouraged to thrive outside of a classroom, They will further marginalize an already hurting group of individuals. I think about how this bill at a moment in time was presented as a aid to our trans community, right? And the only thing that this does for our transgender community, for our 2S community, right, our two-spirit community, for our non-binary community, for our gender diverse community, is put a target on our backs. A very real problem that we do see here, right, is anti-LGBTQ plus rhetoric, and people given the power to protect Oklahomans every single day have used this as a platform for homegrown bigotry and fear. That's not a place where people want to bring their businesses. That's not a place where people want to raise their families. That's not a place where Oklahomans can survive. Our job should be based in making sure that Oklahomans survive, that folks get a chance to raise their families and talk about the good things that they experience here and grow our economy, right? So I want to urge the governor to not sign SB 9 1100, right? I want to urge the House and the Senate to stop these bills, to stop hearing these bills, right? And I want to urge leadership specifically in both of these chambers, because it's not just the fact that these laws were written, it's that leadership said, yes, and we'll hear them too. We want to give a voice to this, right? It's not just about the authors, but it's about everybody who helps these bills get across the finish line. I think the last thing I want to say is that last week I heard of a colleague telling a group of students from a GSA that he couldn't stand against the bill because sometimes he gets death threats for taking unpopular stances. And what that tells our students, right, is that they do not have an advocate here. But I also want to tell you that that's a Monday morning in the office for me. I wake up and there's likely a death threat waiting on me. I risk my life every day for the people of House District 88 in Oklahoma, because that's how much you care. I care for you. And that's also how much I see you care. I get to show up every day knowing that I have a community that supports me across Oklahoma and wants to see us make it through this together. And I cannot stress to you the importance of that and making sure that we stay here in this fight together, because it's hard. I know it is. But there's beauty and power in a whole community of people waiting on the other side and working to get to that other side. So